Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started here. Got a few folks that are still coming in, so that's good to see. My goodness, over 100 already. That's fantastic. Good stuff. Good stuff. So to get started here, we'd love to know maybe kind of where you folks are from. If you would drop in the chat, what state are you in? What part of the country are you in? Yeah, those kinds of questions. We get a kind of sense of where everybody's in, and that'll give us a sense of also give us a little bit of time for more folks in. Oh, Wisconsin, Cleveland, Ohio. How about those Guardians? I saw that, right? They're going to go all the way. I feel it. This is the year. Minnesota, Texas. Someone said yes. That's great. My
I was gonna
goodness.
say, I saw someone. I need to talk to Molly because I just moved to Kansas like a month ago. So Molly, I might need to chat with you later. Tell me what I need to know about living here.
All right.
I
Well,
see
good
a few
deal.
people from my home
Yeah.
state of Iowa too.
Oh, God, Island and Florida, all over the place. All right. Fantastic. Well, that's great. So, a couple of housekeeping items. So we are going to give you kind of a high level take on FAFSA and CSS profile stuff you need to know about those financial aid application forms. But if you have specific questions, we're going to do our best to try to answer questions kind of as we go along here. We just have one very big request. Please put your questions in the questions in the Q&A. It's just way easier for us to keep track of those if they go in the chat, and then we kind of lose track of it all. So if you have any questions along the way, drop them in the Q&A, and whoever's not talking, the other one of us will try to get to those questions. If we have any leftover time at the end, we might have a few minutes left too to do some live Q&A. So that's just our
The, the
request.
other the other rule I have is only put in your questions in Q&A when I'm talking, so Jason has to answer them all.
And I'm going to answer everyone with that's a great question for JP. All right,
Never
friends.
thought of that. That's brilliant.
All right, all right, very good. So why don't we go ahead and get started here? We got some slides here we're going to be showing you, and we may also jump out of the slide deck momentarily, kind of give you a little, not a demo, but show you how kind of all of this works in real life in the MyCap software system. So tonight's presentation is called FAFSA and CSS are coming. We were joking. It's like, oh, the redcoats.
They're actually here.
Yeah, right. They're here. They're not just coming. They're actually here. It's open officially date October 1st. So for those of you who don't know who we are, we're actually with College Aid Pro. And our mission at College Aid Pro, we're college aid consultants, specialists in financial aid and college planning. And our mission is to end the student debt crisis. That is really what we care about. We really are trying to help families shop smarter for college, so that you don't overpay, and hopefully don't leave money on the table in terms of financial aid and so forth. So hopefully tonight we'll give you some clarity, hopefully some stress relief, and ultimately hopefully save you some money. So all right, why don't we go ahead and jump right in? So all right.
Sorry, I'm already trying to answer Q&A.
All right. Oh yeah, we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah, I'll
Right?
say I don't know if everybody knows who we are.
That's a good starting point. My name's Jason. I'm one of the college planning experts, College Aid Pro. A little bit about my background. I've been in higher ed for over 20 years. I started my first year in teaching as a professor was 2002. Believe it or not, that's kind of crazy. And I was a university dean for 7 of those years. So I always joke that I'm the former dean that spills the beans. But more importantly, I have 3 kids of my own. I have a senior in college, a sophomore in college, and a 9th grade in high school. So I've gone through this as a parent. I feel your pain, parents. And so that's a little bit about my background. I've also been a financial advisor since 2008 as well. So just absolutely love this work, helping families know how all of this works, because it is a crazy system. So JP, you want to share a little bit about your background?
I was gonna say it's almost scary how similar our backgrounds are yet different. I worked in higher education over 18 years. I was a director of financial aid, but at one time I worked in the dean's office. Along with presidents, like I personally know the president of Northeastern because he worked with me in the dean's office at USC. So Yeah, so Jason and I are have experiences from different schools in different parts of the country, but ironically you guys are kind of blessed to have two people who actually kind of know the behind this curtain secrets here
Yeah,
of the industry, if you will.
yeah, how the sausage is made, as they say, right? Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the educational part of the workshop now. So if you don't have a MyCap account now, we always encourage you to make sure you have one set up. You can go to, we can drop the link in the chat, but that's where we tell parents definitely to start when it comes to financial aid side of things, um, because in the MyCap software, and we'll kind of jump in there. Let me drop this in the chat.
I got it.
You got it? All
Oh,
right,
you already did
fantastic.
it.
So if you don't have a MyCap account, please do set one up. Just put in information about your student, some basic financial information about the parents, and then put in the schools that you're targeting. And as you'll see, MyCap is really going to be helpful with projecting out how much financial aid you're likely to get, what the net costs of different schools are going to be, and a lot more actually. And we'll kind of show you a little bit about that, how that works here in a second, so you can see kind of financially planning in real time. But if you don't have a MyCap account, please go out and set one up. All right. Okay, let's start. We always begin with just a basic foundational, hey, what is financial aid? You hear that term all the time. Well, financial aid, I mean, basically it's a discount to the sticker price of schools. We use the phrase sticker price on purpose because a lot of schools have this kind of pricing game, I call it, where they have an advertised sticker price for their cost of attendance. That's the jargon. But then you get financial aid that reduces the cost. Okay. But there's different types of financial aid, and it's really important to know the different types and what types of financial aid you're being offered by the schools. Okay. The two best kinds are called gift aid because they're gift money that doesn't have to be paid back. It's free money, so that lowers the cost of college for you. And there are two kinds, right? One is need-based grants. So if you see the word grant, generally that applies to your financial profile, your financial situation. Okay, so if you have demonstrated financial need, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a sec, then you can get a grant, and that's free money that brings down the cost of college. The second kind is merit-based scholarships. Okay, and this is free money based on your students' talents. Okay, the students' grades, test scores, or ability to throw a football or whatever, and that's independent of financial situation. So both of those are free money. That's called gift aid, and it brings the cost of college down. So broadly speaking, you want to try to get as much grant and scholarship money as you can to get the cost down. The other kind of financial aid, it's called self-help aid, and there are two types: loans and work study. So work study is exactly what it sounds like. That's a job your student can get on campus. So say they get a work study job at the library, checking in books or something like that. I think some students still read books these days. But they work there, a couple hours a week and get a paycheck. Now that helps you pay the bill, but it's not helping you. It doesn't bring the cost down. Okay. And then of course the other kind of self-help aid is loans. Loans will help you pay the bill, but not only does it not bring the cost of college down, it increases the cost of college, the total cost of college, in some cases by a lot. So you want to try to do everything you can to try to minimize loan damage, because again, that's going to increase the total cost of college for you. So that's the basic overview of what counts as financial aid. So let's start with the need-based side of things. How do you know if you're going to be eligible for need-based aid from schools? Well, basically there's a formula. There's math. Okay, so what they'll do is they'll take the cost of attendance. That's what we call the sticker price. And that's all in. Okay, so that's the tuition, of course, but it's estimates about other things like your dorm and your meal plan and books and fees and that kind of stuff. And then they look at what's called your student aid index, your SAI. That used to be called the expected family contribution, the EFC. And so if you have older students, perhaps, or when you went to school, it may have been called an EFC. It's just now called the SAI. But basically, that's a number assigned to your family. That's kind of an estimate of how much they think you can pay for 1 year of college. So 1 year of college. And the difference between the cost of attendance and your SAI is how much need that you qualify for. Okay, so say the school cost $70,000, your SAI comes back at $50,000, you qualify for $20,000 of need. Now, importantly, though, not every school will meet your need with free money. They won't. Some do. Some schools meet 100% of your need with grants. Okay, but other schools might meet 50% of that need with grants, and then the other 50% they meet by offering you loans. Okay, so you need to know what is the cost of attendance for a school, what is your SAI, and then what percentage of need does a school meet to kind of get a sense of what your true out-of-pocket net cost is going to be at different schools. And again, MyCap will show you this. Okay, you'll be able to see how this works in MyCap. So the big question is, next slide will be, how do they calculate your SAI, since that's such an important number because it determines how much need you qualify for? Well, it gets pretty complicated, and we don't mean to overwhelm you here, just trying to show you kind of the variables so you can get some clarity on this. Okay, they're going to basically look at your income and your assets. Okay, so let's talk about the assets first. Basically, the assets, everything that's not in a retirement account. Okay, if you have money in a retirement account, that doesn't hurt you from a financial aid perspective. So that's 401k money, IRA money, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now they will assess assets at different percentages depending on if it's a student-owned asset or a parent-owned asset. That's really important to know as well. Parent-owned assets are factored in at a lower percentage than student-owned assets. In other words, parent-owned assets hurt you less than student-owned assets. Okay. Importantly, it's parent and student, right? So if the grandparents have a 529 plan, that's not going to be assessed by the FAFSA, although they do ask you to voluntarily report that on the CSS profile, which we'll talk about here in a second as well. But the most common kind of student-owned asset is a trust. So some families set up trusts for their kids, like a UGMA or UTMA. And if you do have a trust for your student, that's a student-owned asset. The student owns that. That is going to be that's going to be factored in at 20% roughly. So say you have $100,000 in a trust, they think $20,000 of that can be used for college each year. So that would drive up your SAI by $20,000. But if you have money in, say, a parent-owned 529 plan, in contrast, that's a parent-owned asset, so it's only going to be assessed at around 5.6%. So if you got 100 grand to 529, the parent's the owner and the kid's the beneficiary, it's actually parent money, not student money. I know it's for the kid's college, but that's how it works in financial aid. Then out of 100 grand, only 5,600 bucks would drive up your SA. It would only go up by 5,600 bucks. And if you have any kind of jointly owned, like, custodial checking or savings account at the bank, as long as the parent's name is on there, you should report it as a parent asset, not a student asset. Even if it's the kid's money, you can report it as a parent-owned asset if it's jointly owned. So if your kid's got a bank account and your name's not on it, you might want to run to the bank tomorrow and put your name on it, because again, parent-owned assets are assessed at a lower rate. Now, when it comes to real estate, it gets a little tricky. Every school is going to require you to file the FAFSA. And in addition, there's a couple hundred schools that also require the second form called the CSS profile. Okay. And the FAFSA does not take into consideration the home equity in your primary residence, but the CSS profile does. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail here in a bit. But if you have any kind of investment property, rentals, or a second home, anything like that, both the FAFSA and the CSS profile, you're going to have to report the equity in those investment properties. Okay. And what they do is they ask you to report the value of that asset on the day that you file. So if you filed the FAFSA on October 30th, whatever's sitting in the bank or your brokerage account or whatever on October 30th is what you're supposed to report. Okay. Now the income side is very different. The income side, they basically just look at your tax returns from what's called the prior year. In other words, there's a 2-year look back. So let me explain this. This is a little confusing. If your student is going to college, if they graduate from high school in the class of 26 and they're going to college in the fall of 26, you're applying for aid right now in the year 2025. You're applying for aid for next year. They're going to ask you for your most recent tax returns, which is 2024, last year's returns. So if your kid's starting college in 27, they're going to look at your tax returns from 25. And the main driver of the SAI on the income side is the adjusted gross income, the AGI, which is line 11 on the 1040 tax return. So that is the biggest driver of the SAI calculation. So if you have a student going in 2026, it is what it is. You can't really do much about it. But if you have younger kids or going later, you might want to think about some financial planning strategies to maybe get your AGI down to qualify potentially for some more aid. They will also ask about student income if your kid's got a job. And the FAFSA does allow the kid to work and earn up to $11,510 without it being penalized from a financial aid perspective. But the CSS profile will assess basically 50 cents on the dollar that the kid's going to make. And so there's another important variable in terms of calculating your SAI. So again, don't mean to overwhelm you here with all the complexities of how they calculate the SAI, but just want to give you some education on how that all works and potentially look for some planning opportunities if not now, in future years. Okay. Oh, sorry, Kristen, for that comment. Okay. Next, anything you want to add to that, JP? Anything I missed? Or?
I want to give you a pop quiz because it's not really a pop quiz because you know it, but you touched upon this, but because it came in as a Q&A. Real estate, right? Just general real estate. If a family hand owns, let's say, an empty lot at the moment, Zach, would you call that real estate?
I would call that real estate.
Correct. So same rules apply that you explained, whether if you just own a lot and whether you had a home on it or not, right? So market value minus the debt.
Yep, that would be considered a non-retirement asset.
Perfect. And then can you clarify, because I'm sure others are going to have this question, because I actually I got a couple similar questions. The scenario with the 529, obviously the rules are different between a FAFSA and a CSS profile, but if it's a family with two kids and had two 529s, can you highlight or re-highlight the difference between what you got to do between a FAFSA and a CSS profile?
Yeah, great question. So our advice is if the student that's applying for financial aid, if 529 for that kid is what you should report. Generally don't suggest reporting all of the 529 for the other students because it's a different financial aid application. You could voluntarily report that on the CSS profile, but generally we say the sibling 529 not included on the FAFSA. Is that how you respond to that question?
The FAFSA I agree with, yes. Let's jump to the next big topic. I'm just trying to, and I don't want to get in the weeds too much. Admittedly, and I apologize to some of the audience. Some of the audience are asking like kind of very specific questions that I'll be honest, that it would probably need to probably have a consult with the pro to like really like look into your tax returns and exactly how you filed tax your like especially business tax returns. But let me just throw a generic question out to you one, and then we'll move on. What if, let's combine two topics. What if you have real estate in an LLC?
Very good question. So it all depends on the ownership, right? If you are the owner, 100% of the owner of the LLC, and then if you're the owner of the LLC, you're the owner of the asset. If it's a percentage, say it's a partnership or something like that, and you have multiple owners, you can part it out, so to speak, according to the ratio of the ownership percentage.
Yeah, and I'll say like on a CSS profile, and I'll talk about the CSS profile later for everyone, but with a CSS profile, it'll ask like, it'll get in the details of your business, and it'll be like, do you own a business? Yes. And then what kind of business? And maybe it's a multi-member LLC, a partnership, maybe it's a S corp, maybe it's whatever it is, right? And basically when it starts, it'll ask about like if your income that is derived from that, if and then it might be like, what's the value of your business? Well, if your business owns a property, that's part of the valuation. So anyway, where I'm getting is like, to some degree, to the parents that want to get into nitty gritty details, to some degree, it's not going to matter because if we're doing a CSS profile, because we're going to report it no matter what. Like it's going to get caught no matter what. Yeah. All right, let's if it's all right, I'd like to move off of the need-based aid. Can you talk a little about like, what if a family doesn't qualify for need-based aid?
Yes, yeah, we get this question a lot. So if you are, you have super high income or high assets, and so your SAI is above the cost of attendance for a school and you're not going to qualify for need-based aid, are you out of luck? The answer is no, not necessarily. You need a different strategy if cost is a concern. You're trying to get the cost down. So if you don't qualify for any need-based aid, you'd want to focus on things like merit aid, because if you recall from the beginning, there's grants that are need-based aid, but then there are merit scholarships that are completely independent of your financial situation. Okay. Now, I will say, don't necessarily assume you won't qualify for any need-based aid. You might be surprised. This is why using the MyCap software is so helpful. A lot of parents are like, we make $200,000. There's no way we're going to get need-based aid. And then you do the SAI calculation and it turns out you actually will. So don't assume you won't. But for the sake of this, let's assume you won't. What do? Well, you can focus on schools where the student will be eligible for merit scholarships, because again, those are independent of any financial need. Okay. And if you're going to look for schools that do give scholarships, they almost always require you to file the FAFSA and the CSS profile to get those scholarships. So this is a big mistake I see parents make. They say, we're not going to qualify for any need-based aid. What's the point of filing the FAFSA, the CSS profile? Well, you should still file it, because if you can get merit aid, you're going to need to have those on file. And if you don't, you could potentially leave money on the table and miss out on an opportunity there. And again, MyCap will show you this if the schools that you're looking at do give merit scholarships or not. And it's a school by school basis. And when it comes to scholarships, some are more generous than others. Okay. Some schools don't give any scholarships. This is often shocking for a lot of parents. Um, for example, the Ivy League schools, they don't give any scholarships. They don't give any merit scholarships. Okay. So I've talked to parents like, oh, my kid's got a 36 ACT or perfect SAT and a 4.0, et cetera. They're going to get a full ride to Harvard, right? Like, no, they're not going to get any merit aid. Okay. So some of the smaller schools up in New England, et cetera, don't give merit awards at all either. So you need to know the schools on your list, do they give merit or not? And if you're high SAI family, high income, high asset, and you are, and cost is a concern, you might want to think twice about those schools that don't give any merit awards. And importantly, if you are going to be applying for schools that give merit scholarships, we always recommend applying to competing colleges. What we mean by that is these colleges are in competition with each other for students. And so if you're applying to one school that could potentially give merit scholarship, you might want to apply to a school that it competes with for students and hope that maybe they'll give you a bigger scholarship, then you can use that as leverage. I'll give you a personal example of that. So I went to undergrad at the College of Worcester, which is a small liberal arts college in Ohio. And they do give merit scholarships. They do a great job with merit scholarship. And they're competing with schools in that region like Kenyon College or Denison University or Oberlin. And so if your kid was thinking about going to College of Worcester, which they should because it's the best college in the country.
I think Iowa State or USC are, but that's okay.
So if your kid's interested in a school like Worcester, then you might want to think about applying to Denison, Oberlin, Kenyon, and trying to get maybe a bigger scholarship from one of them and using it for leverage at a place like Worcester. So these are strategies you can use even if you don't qualify for need-based aid. So maybe this is a good spot where we could, jump out of the slides and kind of show how this all works in real time.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for if you wouldn't mind maybe sharing the like just a couple seconds of the MyCap, so maybe they can visualize a little bit what the heck we're talking about with financial aid. Like, are you going to get scholarships? Are you going to get grants? All that good stuff.
Yeah. Can you see the screen there?
I can.
All right, perfect. So this is a dummy account. This is a fake account just for illustration purposes. So, you fill out the profile, you put in all your kids' information, all your information, etc., and the system will calculate your student aid index. The federal student aid index, this is schools that only use the FAFSA. The institutional SAI schools that use the CSS profile. You can see there's a difference because it's different methodology. Surprisingly, for some families, sometimes CSS profile schools are less expensive or will give you more aid because the SAI is lower. Okay, once your SAI is calculated, you can put in the different schools, and I'll just pull up one here. You can see how this works. So this is Boston College as an example. And so, they're $99,000 a year. Oh my gosh, schools are 100 grand now. It's crazy. But this family's not going to pay 99 grand if they go to BC. Why is it? Because when you look at the financial aid profile, BC will meet 100% of your need based on your institutional SAI. Now, they do give a few kids get scholarships there, but not a lot, only 1.5% on average. of the students get an award. But based on the family's SAI, institutional SAI, a family going to BC with this profile, well, they're going to get pretty good amount of need-based financial aid. So the true net cost they're going to pay would be a lot less than 99. Okay. Whereas, and let me pull up a different one here. We got American University as an example here. You look at their financial profile. So they'll meet about 89% of your needs, 74% of that with grants. But look at this. About 1 out of every 4 students at American gets a scholarship, and on average, it's about $13,000. So for this particular family combined, they're going to get about $25,000 of aid. And if they do give scholarships, you can look in the MyCap profile and look at all the scholarships they offer. Okay. And so based on this family's profile, based on their GPA of a 3.8, they're automatically going to get an $11,000 scholarship. If they had a 4.0, they'd actually get a $14,000 scholarship. They might even be able to compete for these higher level scholarships as well, based on the stats. Okay. So American University would be one of the schools where you could get some need-based aid. So hopefully I'll stop sharing now, but hopefully that was kind of give you a decent sense of how you got to understand what is your student aid index for FAFSA schools, what's your student aid index for CSS profile schools, and then do the schools meet your need with grants, and do they offer merit scholarships? You put all that together in this complicated formula to try to figure out the estimated net cost for 1 year of college at each of those schools. And you can do that for all the schools on your list on our MyCap account. Okay. All right.
Great. I'm going to try to take over again. And I promise I try to keep up with the Q&A, but it's coming in fast.
All right. How about we swap
and my fingers are tired.
I'll do the Q&A and you can do some talking.
All right. So just for a moment, let's just talk about early decision. I know that they're like, why would we talk about an admissions thing? I bring it up because it can potentially affect the eligibility, or let's say it could potentially affect how much financial aid you actually receive from a school. In the same breath, I'm going to say this is more complex. There is no universal rule on this, but the general concern, the general understanding is that when you apply ED, early decision to a school, and if your child gets accepted, I mean, first, congrats to get accepted, but then part of that contract is you agree to pull or withdraw your applications to all the other schools. Well, when you do that, now you will never know what you would ever receive in terms of financial aid from any of those other schools. And you tend to lose basically leverage if you ever wanted to negotiate with that, that school that you applied ED to. And that, again, that's a general rule. There are exceptions. I'll share the one exception, the most notable exception I'm aware of anyway, is the University of Puget Sound. They actually do the opposite. If you apply ED, they're going to give you more financial aid because they are really doing everything they can to bolster their numbers. And so in a situation like that, ED is actually better. You're going to get better financial aid. So that's kind of the exception to the rule. So I say this because I just don't want you to think this is an absolute rule. But if you are seriously considering ED, I would seriously do your research and make sure you can afford it beforehand, right? But otherwise, if you don't ED, maybe does the school offer EA? Early action. That's my kind of default is early action for admissions. I'm extremely hesitant to ever have my kids do ED. But anyway, just my 2 cents. Just know that it's something to consider. Is that you might lose your leverage. Well, you definitely lose your leverage, and they might not be giving you the best offer. It just makes it a little harder to negotiate. Okay, let's talk about the actual, financial aid, maybe a bit more the process, the forms and all that kind of stuff, less about the theory of financial aid and how it works, but more now kind of the forms. And I can't stress this enough. When it comes down to it, I'm going to tell everyone freshman year, Everyone should apply for financial aid. I have never told someone not to. Always apply for financial aid. A couple of reasons why. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to families who said, "Oh, I know I won't qualify, and so I'm not going to bother." And I'm like, "Well, how do you know you don't qualify?" "Well, these my friends, they said they didn't get any, or my, everyone, the moms in the mom group told me I won't get any." And I'm like, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I'm sorry, they don't know what they're talking about. And second, everybody's situation is different. I can have siblings have completely different situations. I can have neighbors in the same in the same kind of homes and such, and their situation can be completely different. I can have two families where it's, let's say, a family of four, income of 200,000, let's say same assets, and family A will qualify for nothing, and family B will qualify for a ton. The point is it's more complex than you ever know and realize. So don't listen to that people that don't know what they're talking about, right? Always apply for financial aid. Another reason, there's some schools, and this, I admit, this is a little wackadoodle, but some schools will only consider the merit aid, the scholarships, if you apply for the need-based aid. So you might be leaving potential scholarship money off the table for not doing the FAFSA, if you will. So always apply. Another reason, you don't know your future. I can't tell me how many times I've had families where they maybe were in a good financial position where they probably almost could write a check, for that freshman year. And then maybe just before school started or during freshman year, or maybe it's sophomore year, but someone lost a job. I have a new family right now. The dad, this is terrible. He got hit by a car and he's disabled, and all their money is going to all the medical bills right now. You can't predict the future, right? Well, there are some schools that are going to say, well, since he didn't apply for financial aid the first time, you lost out. We won't consider the change in your circumstances, or maybe you did apply, but so, your circumstances are going to change. Maybe you lose a job or whatever, and you want to be able to appeal. Well, you need to have that financial aid, in to begin with. Even just for the sake to take out loans, like the federal direct loan for the students, which is going to be the cheapest loan that the student can get. That's in their name only. Mom and dad don't have to co-sign for it. You have to fill out a FAFSA just to qualify for that. Or if mom and dad, if you want the access to the Parent Plus loan, you at least have to fill out the FAFSA, right? So there's all sorts of reasons why everyone should. I tell every family, fill out the financial aid, the freshman year for sure. I have never not said to do it. So please just hear me. If you're thinking, I don't need to do it, I'm telling you, you should do it. You don't know what you might be giving up by not doing it. When it comes to filling out the financial aid forms, what are you going to need to know? Well, as Jason already explained, this SAI is calculated based upon income and assets, right? So if especially if you have to do a CSS profile, you're going to need a copy of your tax returns handy. So I could be wrong, but I'm assuming most of you are probably like class of 2026, parents of 2026. So since it's using prior year, we need the 2024 tax returns, right? You're going to want to know basically the values of your assets. That'd be the simplest way I describe it. So that means, log into your bank account, like what's in your checking and savings. If you have investments, like a Merrill Lynch or crypto or whatever, right? What's the values, right? If you have real estate property, when it comes to like market values, I can tell you what we did in financial aid, before Redfin and Zillow did. We went online still and looked for it, and saw. So nowadays it's super easy. I can put in any address and see what Redfin and Zillow say. So I'm not telling you to use those numbers, by the way. There's a whole strategy that I go through. But anyway, be prepared to document values, or have a good idea of what the market value is, and know what your debt is, because they're looking at your equity. So that's the market value minus the debt, right? So know what your debt is on any of these real estate properties. Even though your retirement accounts don't impact the SAI calculation, the CSS profile, you gotta love them. No, we don't, but they will ask even what are the values of your retirement accounts. Okay. So just again, be ready to have those numbers handy if we have to fill out the CSS profile. And if there's a situation where like we're collecting child support or paying child support, again, have that info handy. So if you have all this kind of info handy, it will make it a little easier, a little quicker to submit the financial aid forms. That way you're not, saving your work progress, going back, looking for it, coming. So just try to collect all this stuff ahead of time. And I'll just say is, as you're going through this, especially if, again, I pick on the CSS profile. If you have to do the CSS profile, take breaks, save your progress if you have to, and come back later. And know that, what I always say is double check, before I ever hit submit, double check, I like to actually wait a day. Just my brain works better that way. I like to pause and rest, sleep, and wait a day, and then I'll go back and review it again and then submit. But I will say is if you did make a mistake, like if you're like, oh my goodness, I totally forgot about blah, blah, blah. I need to, you technically can go back and make a correction. So it's not the end of the world. All right. But anyway, just basically breathe. Yeah. Breathe. You can get through it. So let's talk about the FAFSA, because this is critical, because every school is going to ask you to fill out the FAFSA, right? And I know it says it goes live October 1 today. It's actually been live for like a week now, which is a huge improvement compared to the last couple of years. And as we said, it's using the prior tax year. So if your class of 2026, it's going to basically import in through IRS the 2024 tax data. Now, as I saw a Q&A about this, so I want to address this. Basically, like, who fills out the FAFSA? Maybe I'll address it this way. Who fills out the FAFSA, and who needs like logins and such? Well, the student for sure, because it's technically their application. So the student is going to need to create an FSA ID. Now, don't get confused. It's not like you're going to get an actual government ID number. Like sometimes I have parents saying, oh, I'm waiting for like a new social security number or something. It's not really that. You're not getting an actual ID. It's the ID is your username, whatever you create, or your email, right? So the student has to create an FSA ID and a FAFSA account. Think of it that way. Then for sure, at least one, I'll describe it as one custodial parent will need to also create an FSA ID, have their own FAFSA account, and possibly both. It depends. So first, if the parents are, let's just say, married, filing jointly, and so basically all your tax info is on one tax return, okay, then only one parent is going to need this FSA ID. Okay. But what if the parents are married and like filed separately? Because I have some parents where they live literally in different states. Okay, well then both parents are going to need an FSA ID, right? They're going to both need the FAFSA account so that they can both get their tax returns imported into the application. What if the parents, are divorced, or at least, legally, like let's say separated, right? And so that's when we have to figure out who's the custodial parent. And the custodial parent is just simply, at the day that we're filing, a look back of 12 months, which parent financially contributed the most to the child, right? So if you feel like, oh, we're both 50-50 equal, and maybe, all right, well, in this next month, whoever, makes less or has less assets, kick in a little bit extra so you can qualify as the custodial parent. But whoever's that custodial parent will need that FSA ID. Okay. I think I covered all the basic scenarios, right? Is there any scenario? Yeah. I think so. Anyway, so keep in mind think of it as, and procedurally, the way I always think about it, again, this is a student application. So let the student start the FAFSA. Let the student fill in their name, their basic demographics. They put in their schools and all that good stuff. And then they will invite the contributor, AKA you, mom or dad, right? Whoever's the custodial parent. They will invite you, you will get an email, and then you will log in with your FSA ID as a parent. Now, I don't know in this group, what if you like are a parent and you have twins? Maybe you have, two kids that are class of 2026. Just so you understand, each child will need their own FSA ID. But you as the parent only need that one FSA ID. You only need your one FSA ID because you're only one person. So, but each child will need to have an FSA ID. So I hope that made sense. And yeah, the FAFSA's live. It's been working. I will say, check your deadlines with the schools. Like if your schools that your childs are applying to, like, they'll have different deadlines for admissions, right? That early decision, early action, or regular decision, let's say. And then depending on what that admissions application deadline was, there will be a different financial aid deadline, adjusting accordingly too. So always know your deadlines. And like, I literally would recommend keep a spreadsheet, write it all down, and whatever school is the earliest deadline, just make sure you have everything prepped and ready and submitted by the earliest deadline, and you'll be good. Okay. So again, next steps: create that FSA ID, set up a username, password, security questions, backup. They'll give you a backup code, all that stuff. But I don't know if we can put that in the chat, maybe the link here. I had it here. Let me do this. Let me put this in the chat if I can find the chat. Here we go.
Seriously answering Q&A. So
no worries. Yep, and just a reminder to everyone, like, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A, not the chat. But I just dumped in the chat some FAFSA links there for you. Okay. And let's talk about, geez, I got ahead of myself. I talked about contributor already. I talked about all this good stuff. So, all right, let's move on. FAFSA tips. Frankly, I could give you probably more than double the tips, but I'll say it this way: even with this new simplified FAFSA, there are plenty of parents. I shouldn't just pick on parents. There's plenty of families, I'll say, who still make costly mistakes when this stuff. So just to kind of re-summarize some of the points Jason made earlier, do not include retirement accounts on a FAFSA. So when they ask about your investments, like, read the fine print or the little pop-up bubble. It does not include retirement accounts. So a 401, a Roth, IRA, cash value life insurance, don't include it. On a FAFSA, when it asks about real estate, do not include your primary home. The house you live under, do not include that. If you have a second property, as we talked earlier, it could be an empty lot, or maybe it's a rental property, maybe whatever it is. Okay, like that you would include on the FAFSA. If you have a 529, or maybe more specifically, maybe a multiple 529s, for multiple kids, you only report the 529 value of that applicant, that particular child. Don't include that's a new rule with the change in the rules with the FAFSA. You don't have to report your total 529, only the value for that particular applicant. When asked, like, do you want to be considered for work study? I would always say yes, and there's no harm in that, because at the end of the day, if you are eligible for work study, and maybe then when school starts and maybe the student doesn't want to work, they can ask the financial aid office to remove it at that point. I wouldn't remove it early. Like say yes in general. Like, give yourself all the opportunities for all the available financial aid. And we talked about this too. Just because your SAI could be whatever number, and you'll see this in the MyCap software, regardless of what your SAI is, that doesn't mean that's going to be what you actually are expected to pay at a school. You could have an SAI of, I'm making this up, 20,000, but as you plug your schools in the MyCap, there might be a couple that are really generous with financial aid that say, okay, we're going to give you enough financial aid so your cost is 20. But otherwise, you're going to see other schools that say, yeah, we just don't have the funds. And even though your SAI is 20, if you come here, you're going to probably pay 35 or more, right? So just don't assume the SAI means that's what you're going to pay. And again, when it comes to evaluating businesses, real estate and such, this is not the time to be boastful and go like, look how much money I got. Like, be conservative, be very conservative with your valuations. And there's a bunch of different strategies. We can't possibly go onto all the different strategies. I would say if you are in that situation where maybe you have significant business assets or significant real estate assets, I'll just tell you now, there's multiple ways we might approach it. And I would tell you the best thing you do is book an hour with a consult, with a pro to talk, like how walk you through it and see, like, let's see what we can do. And the final thing is, and I touched upon this a little bit ago, deadlines. Every school's gonna have a different deadline. Again, mark it down on a spreadsheet or something. You can't afford to miss a deadline. Basically, there's an adage. You might have heard this. I mean, I grew up to this old adage saying, money doesn't grow on trees. That's true with financial aid, and so they have limited funds, and so if you miss a deadline, you're kind of just inviting the financial aid office. You're telling them, like, this isn't important to me. I'm not a priority. Give your money to somebody else. So do not miss a deadline. All right. Let's talk about the CSS profile. And I'm going to put this in the chat right now because this, I know it came across a couple times in the Q&A, and I tried to respond to this. So if a few of you asked, more of you probably have the question. And that's basically like, okay, you say 250, roughly 250 schools use a CSS profile. Well, which schools? So I just put in the link here that'll take you straight to the CSS profile site that tells you, hey, here's the list. Here's the schools that require the CSS profile for this upcoming year. All right. So again, officially went live today. It's been live really for a good week now. It is a different application than the FAFSA, different rules. It's going to go into much more detail. And to give you some context here, like, Jason, would you say it's fair, like, especially with the new simplified FAFSA, if we have all the data, we have all the logins, I can bang out a FAFSA in like 20 minutes, maybe. Yep. No big deal. A CSS profile, let's say it's a business owner or something like that, nothing crazy, but just like maybe one business. Again, knowing I have all the documents, and I've lived, sleep, bled CSS profiles for 25 years. I might do it in 45 minutes. But that's me knowing everything, right?
Efficient. That would be good. That'd be efficient.
To give you context, though, I don't know why I got suckered into doing it. And 2 years ago, and I told myself I would never do it again. But 2 years ago, a family asked me, like, hey, we want to prep the form. Can you just kind of sit on the Zoom and watch over us to make sure we're doing it right? I agreed foolishly. 3.5 hours later, we finally hit submit. So it is an entirely different beast. Okay. So again, that's, as I said earlier in the earlier slide, if you're doing it on your own, take breaths, save your progress, make little, you don't have to do it all in one sitting, but don't overly stress on it. Anyway, some of the differences, again, FAFSA does not ask about your primary home. A CSS profile will. In the case of divorced families or separated families, on a FAFSA, we have to know who's that custodial parent. Okay. And now when it comes to filling out a CSS profile, okay, the student and the same custodial parent will fill out the CSS profile. But pretty much all these schools, not almost all these schools, are going to say, hey, that non-custodial parent, that other parent, we know they exist. And we want them to fill out a CSS profile as well. So that non-custodial parent is going to be asked to fill out a CSS profile. Again, as I said earlier, business owners, they're gonna dive into, like, tell us about which tax return you file, and then depending on which one you select, they're going to start diving into, well, tell us this line, tell us that line, tell us everything about who's the owners. You could have like 3 other partners that are not related to you. You got to list them all out. Like it's just more invasive. And certainly more complex. The only thing that's easy about the CSS profile is the logins. It's your student's College Board logins. So the login that your student is using to log into the SAT or the APs or anything like that, it's the same login. It's all housed under College Board. So that's the easy thing is the logins. Some tips. I will say when you see the CSS profile, There are, as you go through it, there's going to be questions that have a little asterisk, meaning like it's a required question. You have to answer it. But there's also going to be a lot of questions you don't have to answer. There's no asterisk by it. Go ahead and skip them. Okay. It's okay to skip the questions that are not absolutely required. And I say it, and I've had conversations with parents like, oh, I feel like I'm lying or something because I didn't answer that question. I mean, I'm looking at my tax return and I have a number there. It's okay. It's not required. You can skip it. And it's okay because these schools are going to ask you to upload your tax return, first of all. So they're going to see all of it. And second, they're getting all this tax information directly from IRS anyway through the FAFSA. So you're not lying to them. You're not like being deceived. Just save yourself a little bit of headache and don't answer the questions that they don't require you to answer. Other tips we've talked about, again, don't overvalue real estate, et cetera, et cetera. The best trick question, in my opinion, and Jason, I wonder if you have any experience with this too, but the question near the end, it's near the end of the CSS, and it basically says like, hey, how much can you afford to pay for college? Or how much are you going to pay for college, and whatnot. That answer can only hurt you.
Yeah.
For the most part. I'll share a quick story. I have many, but I'll share just one. So I remember I had a family come to me, the summer before their freshman year, we accepted them to USC, and there's in my office and looking at their financial aid. They came to me because they're just like, we're so excited our child got accepted, but we just can't afford, we saw your financial aid. We just can't afford it. And I sat down and I started running through like, well, let's look through it, let's look through the income and assets you told us and such. And I'm running through it and I'm like, wow, like their SAI back then we called it, EFC, but it was like $500, super low. And like they should have gotten a ton of financial aid from us. We should have given them everything basically. And here we are, we only gave them like half, like we were basically saying their cost is 20,000. And I was like, that's odd. Like this isn't adding up. And so I went into the CSS profile, and sure enough, on that question, like, how much can you afford to pay or whatever, they wrote 20,000. And I asked them, I was like, well, why did you do that? And they're like, well, we were afraid that if we said zero, we wouldn't have been admitted. And I was like, well, I get the logic. It's wrong, but that, I get the logic. And so I had to overwrite it and basically give them, like an extra 20,000 in grant money. But, but they, if they had not come talk to me about it, they would have potentially overpaid by $20,000 a year. So don't over answer that, don't overstate it. I'll give you, I'll give you a second one. A case with like divorced parents, and the parents didn't talk to each other very well. And so like together they thought they would pay like 15,000 total. So when each parent filled out the form, they said 15,000. So when the financial aid office received it, they were like, oh, wow, each one of them is going to pay 15. So they made it 30. So again, that question only hurts. Like just be careful on how you answer that one. They'll even ask about, and it's annoying, but they'll ask about like your future income, so like when you fill out the CSS profile, you're going to get asked 3 different years. This is super annoying. 3 different years about income. It's going to say, hey, tell us about 2024, which is the only year that mattered. They're going to ask you about 2025. And I'm like, okay, it's almost done. We can kind of give you some decent estimates. But then they annoyingly ask you to predict 2026. And I'm like, no, so I just give them the same numbers I do for 2025, unless I know I'm going down, but I certainly won't report a higher number. So just, don't overestimate that either. And then at the very end of that CSS profile, there is going to be a box, an open text box where it's basically like, is there any special circumstances that you would like to tell us about that you haven't, that are not reflected on the application? And everyone, this is when everyone wants to like tell them their story. Like I got laid off, or, I got, take care of my parents, blah, 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 blah. Don't tell them anything at this time. Any special circumstances, my suggestion is keep those, keep your cards close to your vest. And here's why. And it comes down to is, and I think about it this way: when I worked in the financial aid office, and a family, if they came to me and said, "Hey, we filled out our financial aid forms, and we told you about some special circumstance in that spot," and if they ask, like, "Well, could you tell us, like, did you guys look at that? Did you take that into consideration?" I could literally, because I was, the director, I could literally go in and say, "Yes, I can see." I would call it like version one of your financial aid, where it didn't take into consideration anything, and they never would have seen that. And then I could say, here's version two, where we did look at that and considered it, and here's the improvement in your financial aid. And I could literally see the differences, and I could show them and document it, no problem. And I didn't mind doing that. Nowadays, it doesn't really work that way. I have yet to find one any financial aid office in this country who would be willing to even have that conversation, and show those numbers, right? That where they could show, oh yeah, this is what would have been first, and this is what it is now. And you certainly aren't going to get someone competent enough if you call in and talk to a frontline person. So here's my point: is you won't know if they really took your special circumstances into consideration. And if they call, of course they're going to say, "Oh yeah, we did," but you don't know, right? So I want to know. So the only way you can know from this side of the desk is you don't tell them anything. Just give them the base information. Receive your first financial aid offer letter. Then I tell them about my special circumstances. And then when I receive a revised financial aid offer letter, that's when I know, oh, this made a difference. They really did take this into consideration. Or, wow, that they only gave me $500 more for that. That doesn't seem right. Like, I feel like it should be. Anyway, the only way you can know when you're on this side of the desk is give them your base information, receive that base financial aid offer letter, then basically appeal, tell them your change in circumstances, and get a revised offer letter. So I hope that makes sense as far as strategy and why I do it that way. But we already talked about deadlines. So basically, I think this wraps it up pretty much. And let me stop share here. How'd we do? Did I give you any more good Q&A?
Yeah, we got 102 questions answered. Woo!
Man, your fingers were typing.
I was going so fast. I misspelled every other word, but hey, and there's
That's funny.
no punctuation.
Before I guess parting words, is there any sage advice you want to give them?
The only thing I would mention is, like, again, there were some really great questions in here, a lot of complicated situations that are way beyond, anything that we could advise on without knowing more. So we'd encourage you to take advantage of we do free 15-minute consultations. Let's drop the link for that maybe in the chat. So if you want to meet with us and talk to one of us one-on-one, one of the financial aid pros, a college aid pro, and get your questions answered, happy to chat with you. Like I said, we always do free 15-minute, just a quick consultation, kind of answer some questions. Some parents, if you want additional help, you're like, I don't even want to deal with this, take it off my plate. Please file the forms for me. Please do the appeals for me, et cetera, et cetera. We also have, we have additional services to support parents as well. And if that interests you, we'd be happy to chat with you about that. But that's my advice. Take advantage of that free consult with our financial aid pros, because this stuff is so complicated. And we gave you a high level general kind of take on all the stuff tonight, but every family's different, every school's different, every kid's different. And so you just want to make sure you're getting everything right, not making any mistakes, not missing out any opportunities. Because if you do it right, you can save quite a bit off the cost of college. So I encourage everybody to take advantage of that free 15-minute consultation.
And I'm just gonna my little ditty, if you will. And if anyone's heard my webinars in the past, you've heard me say this before, but a common motto, a common phrase that you'll see on college campuses, it might be inscribed in walls, might be in an elevator, is something to the effect of knowledge is power. No, it's not. That's a lie. Applied knowledge is power. So what I'm saying is we try to give you some good, helpful info, like, and just don't take this and go, oh, that was, that I learned something. And there's, you put it to the side and go to your busy life. I get it. We're all busy. Like Jason and I are working well over 12-hour days right now. But do something with this, right? And here's the analogy I'll give you is maybe like a thumbs up or heart or something, but like how many of you parents are the type of parents that, at night when we're exhausted, you put on HGTV, whatever remodel show, and after that episode, you get inspired and you look to your spouse and you go, honey, let's remodel that kitchen or bathroom or whatever, right? I'm that way. I'm the DIY type. I'll be honest. My uncles, I grew up with, drywallers, construction guys, plumbers. That's my world. I love doing that stuff. I put my wife to the test the first year of marriage and got her to help me remodel a Victorian home in downtown LA. And that's what I learned. My wife is not that type, And so I'll just say, if you are that DIY type, the best thing you can do to put applied action here is sign up for the premium account of MyCap. It's $4.99, $5 a month, right? Less than a cup of coffee. And that's going to open up a bunch of access for you. One, you can put in all the schools you want. Two, a bunch more access to like our office hours and other resources. Like if you're the DIY type, $5 a month, and you can be quote unquote YouTube certified, right? But in that same vein, in that same token, is like if I'm remodeling a house or remodeling, a bathroom, whatever, and I get over my head on like something, what do? I call in a pro for the day, and you can do that. If you have the premium account with College A Pro, you can then click that little button that says "Talk to a Pro," and you can book an hour and have any of the pros help you like any specific questions you have, right? Now, let's say you're not the DIY type. You're the one that says, no, I don't have time for this. Or maybe there's just someone goes, I want to make sure I paid the least amount possible for college. As Jason said, then talk with one of us for a consult. We can walk you through the various services we offer. What do we save on average? How many, you remember the number, Jason? Like on average, how much money do we save a family per year?
It was $70,000 on average, and if they used loans, it was even more than that, I believe, like 120.
Yeah, right. Like so, it's considerable, so that's why I say, like, if you're the type that says, I want to pay the least, for whatever school, then talk to us about what we can do to help, how we can help you and at least evaluate your situation to show how we can help you with that. So that's my last 2 cents is knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. So anyway, I think we covered probably most everything.
Yeah. The other phrase I heard lately around the shop is action absorbs anxiety.
Yeah, I love that.
That's a good one. So I've been using that a lot too.
I love that.
Such a stressful, overwhelming process. It's your kids. I get it. I've got kids in college. I've gone through this. It's a high dollar amount. Some of you may want to retire someday. And so it's very anxiety inducing. And the best thing you can do is take action to reduce that anxiety. So hopefully this was helpful, everybody. Again, we tried to answer as many questions as we could. We tried to keep up. There were some really great ones, but just a lot in there. Encourage everybody to take advantage of that free consult. We got a meeting link in the chat. It is filling up fast. I will say that this is the busiest time of the year, but I put a link in there for our calendar to book some time if you want to get some help. So I encourage you to get on the calendar sooner than later, because like I said, it's filling up fast. Parents are scared.
Yeah, 100%. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Take care. Thanks so much.